After 2 months of an Israeli blockade, humanitarian groups say their response in Gaza is on the verge of total collapse. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. The International Committee of the Red Cross says Palestinians are now facing a daily struggle to survive and are appealing to Israel to reopen the humanitarian corridors. Israel halted all aid into Gaza on March 2nd, just days before the collapse of a ceasefire with Hamas. The United Nations has repeatedly warned of a humanitarian catastrophe and says the blockade is collectively punishing children, women and the elderly. For more, we turn now to Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. He is in Ramallah. He's the founder and leader of the Palestinian National Initiative and president of the Palestinian Medical Relief Society. Dr. Barghouti, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Barghouti, it's been 2 months since Israel unilaterally violated the ceasefire and blocked deliveries of food, medical supplies, as well as other humanitarian supplies. The World Food Programme says it's run out of food. Here's Dr. Michael Ryan of the World Health Organization. Let's listen to what he had to say.
The reality here is that we are breaking the bodies and the minds of the children of Gaza. We are starving the children of Gaza, because if we don't do something about it, we are complicit in what is happening before our very eyes. We are complicit. We are causing this. You, us, and everyone who does nothing about it. It's horrific.
So, Dr. Barghouti, what is your assessment of conditions in Gaza right now?
Well, our assessment is based on direct contact with our people in Gaza. We have 80 medical teams working there, providing care to approximately 200,000 people every month. And the reports we get from them are horrifying. What you see in Gaza now is a combination of 3 war crimes at the same time. A war crime of genocide with continuous bombardment. Today alone, they killed about 50 more people. Collective punishment with starvation. They are starving people purposefully. And also they are conducting ethnic cleansing. What we see here is a situation where for more than 62 days now, not a single piece of bread or any pill of medication or any glass of water has entered Gaza. People are dying. We already have reports of 30 children who died because of starvation. The weaker part of the society, the people with disability, the pregnant women, the elderly people, the people with chronic diseases are suffering most and are going to die. And this is happening in front of the whole world. But more than that, we are terrified, we are horrified about the fact that we could see very serious outbreak of infections, epidemics in Gaza, because Israel is not allowing even vaccines to get to Gaza. We are so worried that after having 112,000 cases of infectious hepatitis, we are now afraid we will have an outbreak of poliomyelitis and tetanus and typhoid and diphtheria and measles. All of that because Israel is not allowing even vaccines to get to Gaza. It's a horrifying situation. It is true that anybody that does not do anything now to force Israel to stop this atrocity will be complicit with this terrible war crime against the Palestinian people.
The Gaza Health Ministry reports that Israel has killed 585 children since it broke that ceasefire. The total number of people killed is just over 2,150. We also see that hospitals have been demolished in Gaza. And, you know, listening to you and listening to what Dr. Ryan just said about the fact that everyone is responsible for this, how does one explain that the world is silent on this?
I cannot explain it, but I can tell you we feel hurt, we feel injured, we feel traumatized, because we believe the international community, especially the Western countries, who used to teach us about human rights and international law and international humanitarian law and democracy, where are they now? Where are they when Israel is violating every international law? Today, the Israeli army also bombarded a ship with foreign solidarity people who were marching just to advocate for providing humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza and to lifting the siege. And they bombarded them near Malta in the international waters. Israel is behaving, the Israeli behavior is a behavior of piracy, total arrogance, and total violation of every international law.
Are there any Palestinian groups, including the Palestinian Authority, that's made direct appeals to the United Nations or lobbied governments that are involved in this? There are a number of governments that are supplying weapons to Israel. They include the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, India. Has anyone made representations to these countries?
Absolutely, of course. That was done. And as you know, the case is being discussed now in the International Court of Justice. And most countries that attended there supported the right of the Palestinian people to end this terrible siege and this terrible genocide. But the United States of America not only provides political support to Israel and tries to protect Israel from any international pressure, it is also providing Israel with the same bombs that are used in Gaza. The United States and maybe other countries like Germany have been responsible for providing Israel with the 100,000 tons of explosives that were already thrown on the people of Gaza, with an average of 50 kilograms of explosives for each man, woman, and child in that little place. And it's like 5 times the explosive power of the nuclear heads that were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is the scope of the crime. And the United States is responsible because it is complicit, it is participant, unfortunately, in what's happening in Gaza. And that applies to many other Western countries who insist not to take any steps to restrain Israel, although we know very well if President Trump wants, he can restrain Israel in 24 hours, maybe even in 5 hours. But he doesn't do that. On the contrary, they refuse to see us, the Palestinian people, as equal human beings. They speak all the time about the 59 Israeli captives, but not a single word is said about the 10,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails who are also subjected to torture, to starvation, and to terrible treatment.
There are still some diplomatic efforts to try and get that ceasefire back on board. There are talks taking place which are brokered by Qatar. In fact, the Qatari Prime Minister says there has been a bit of progress. Those were his words. What do you know about that?
Unfortunately, that progress is gone because Israel rejected all the proposals, whether the proposals that were made by Qatar or Egypt or jointly by Qatar and Egypt. Israel is blocking the road. Israel is responsible for the continuation of this war. And what Netanyahu says is that he wants the Israeli captives back, but that wouldn't mean he will stop the war. He wants, after getting his captives, to continue the war. And he declares that his main goal is now ethnic cleansing of Gaza. What he calls the ethnic cleansing that he calls the view or the vision of President Trump. Which is very dangerous. This man wants to ethnically cleanse the 2.1 million people from Gaza completely. And the Israeli army is already preparing the ground to create concentration camps, to squeeze the people there and put them in the most difficult conditions with the aim of trying to force them out of Gaza.
Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
For more now on the Israel-Hamas conflict, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Philadelphia is John Ghazvinian. He is a lecturer in modern Middle East studies at the University of Pennsylvania. Here in the studio, Moien Odeh is an international law attorney and a PhD candidate at George Mason University School of Peace Studies and Conflict Resolution. And from London, we're joined by Yossi Mekelberg. He is a senior consulting fellow with the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Yossi Mekelberg, as we just heard there, fierce criticism of what Israel is doing. When the country is facing charges of genocide, its leaders have been accused of war crimes. There's also been very, very loud condemnation from the United Nations as well as human rights groups like Amnesty International as well as Human Rights Watch. But none of this seems to have deterred Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, there's no indication that he is going to change course. Let's listen to some of what he had to say recently.
The battle is not over yet. The war of 7 fronts is at its peak. In the name of the fallen, we will continue to pursue the mission of victory, including the return of all our hostages.
So what do you believe is the government's motive in this? I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu says that what is going on in Gaza right now is a way to force Hamas to release the hostages. But is it really about hostages? Because Hamas has offered in the past to release all the hostages.
Good evening. You see, most Israelis don't believe Netanyahu that the motivation is what he calls the defeat of Hamas anymore. Obviously, no one in Israel is a supporter of Hamas who want to see Hamas governing Gaza, but at the same time, they think that Netanyahu and his government has ulterior motive, especially Netanyahu himself. He is embroiled in a corruption trial. There is an investigation within his office by the internal security, and all what he needs is to continue at least one front. We see also now bombing in Syria. The security situation in the West Bank is deteriorating. And elections are a year and a half away. And that's the kind of the situation or conditions are most conducive for Netanyahu to stay in power. At the end of the day, as Netanyahu really wanted, there were enough opportunities to reach an agreement as a year ago, and even more to release all the hostages. It's not to say that Hamas couldn't release the hostages as they wanted, but we need to understand the motivation of Netanyahu has to do with his survival in power and his survival probably out of jail. But I think we need also to understand that the only way out of it is if Washington will put pressure. We saw that it was successful back in January.
There's been one other development, Yossi, and that is, I mean, the government is standing very firm on its position on allowing aid to get into Gaza. They've just blocked all routes into Gaza, but the Israeli military is recommending that the blockade should be lifted, that aid should be allowed in. So why this difference between the military and the government right now?
Again, it goes to the pressure from the right wing by returning back on the 18th of March to war, violating the ceasefire, putting more pressure, stopping the humanitarian aid. Not only it kept the one right-wing party led by Bezalel Smotrich to stay in government, also the return of Itamar Ben-Gvir and his party, creating, from his point of view, a stable coalition. Those who are in charge of the situation from a military point of view know, hey, this is a disaster also for Israel. They push more people into the hands of the radicals, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, let alone many people suggest that preventing humanitarian aid in the middle of a war from civilian population is a war crime that at the end of the day the government is asking the military to commit a war crime, and the military is not interested. It doesn't want to do that, but at the end of the day they abide by the law and what the government asks them to do.
John Ghazvinian, there have been several other developments in the region, in this part of the Middle East. Israeli forces, as Yossi pointed out a moment ago, have also bombed targets in the Syrian capital, Damascus. The Israelis explained this by saying that they did this to protect Druze minorities in Syria. But what do you make of it? I mean, this is a relatively new government in Syria right now.
Well, yes. I mean, as we heard from the earlier soundbite, the Israeli Prime Minister believes that says that he's fighting a 7-front war. The reality is that for several months now, There's been no real obvious off-ramp for Benjamin Netanyahu. He's sees this, I think, as a defining moment in his premiership, in his leadership of Israel, and in his country's history. The attacks of October 7th, 2023 have unleashed a series of events and escalations that now have Israel on a course of almost constant warfare with many of its neighbors and militias in the region. We've seen, of course, the United States and the United Kingdom recently joining in attacks against the Houthis, while also the United States conducts indirect talks with Iran over its nuclear program against the backdrop of this kind of multi-front Israeli war.
And you mentioned the attacks that have been taking place against the Houthis in Yemen. What is the status of that right now? Because the United States has hit more than 800 targets, and that also includes a refugee center for African refugees. That was earlier this week.
Well, it seems, purely speculating, that the United States wants to send a very strong message to Iran that backs the Houthis, while also negotiating with Iran. I think it's been President Trump's position all along to make sure that the Iranians understand that the window for negotiations is not a kind of indefinite one, that that there are very harsh consequences if negotiations fail. He's made that clear again in recent interviews. And Pete Hegseth, Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, just a couple of days ago posted on social media to the Iranians a very direct message saying, we know what you're doing, we see what you're doing in Yemen, and you will pay a price at a time of our choosing. I think the messaging to the Iranians now from the United States is that we are not afraid to go to war. We want to see the negotiations succeed. Interestingly enough, I think quietly behind the scenes over the past few weeks, there's a lot of reason for optimism about the possibility of the negotiations succeeding.
Moien Odeh, great to have you with us in the studio. Let's get back to what's going on in the occupied territories. There was a report from the United Nations Human Rights Office, and it says that Israel has expanded and consolidated its illegal colonial settlements in the occupied West Bank. In fact, the UN High Commissioner has called this a war crime. Of course, these illegal settlements are under international law, they're illegal. What can you tell us about the situation there, the security situation there?
Well, unfortunately, I think the Israeli government is using mainly the focus on what's happening in Gaza and all the crimes that's happening in Gaza to create facts on the ground in the West Bank. The plan for the Israeli government in general and for Smotrich, is a minister in the Israeli government, is to try to create as many new colonial and as many new settlements inside the West Bank, to destroy as many Palestinians' houses in the West Bank, to try to control as much as possible of empty land, to allow them to create to expand all the settlements, and so when the world will wake up from what's really happening in Gaza, they will find out that it's too late. Unfortunately, the facts over the ground are already changed. All the refugee camps are almost destroyed. Jenin refugee camp, Tulkarem refugee camp, other refugee camps are almost totally destroyed. Almost 50,000 Palestinians already transferred from their houses to different places now which is also a big crisis in the West Bank. Unfortunately, all what's happening in Gaza, which is very, very important and very, very unfortunate, is taking the focus from what's happening also in the West Bank. If what's happening in the West Bank now was happening without Gaza, trust me, all the world will be speaking about this. Yeah. But it's a game of focusing where the media will focus here.
Right, Moien, and when we look at the security situation in the occupied West Bank, now the Palestinians have their own security forces, which are under the control of the Palestinian Authority. Have they been deployed? What role do they play there?
Israel excuse for attacking the West Bank and the West Bank refugee camps was mainly that Hamas is there and they are doing attacks against the Israeli and the Israeli settlements. But through the last few months, it was clear that it was a bigger plan, that they want to control again as much land as possible. The PA is almost controlling all its own territory. They are not allowing any attacks against the Israelis. They are not allowing any kind of even demonstrations in many cases against the Israelis. But despite this, Netanyahu and his government continuing with their big plan, which is cleaning as many lands in the West Bank and to allowing the settlers to control these lands. Unfortunately, even now, there's a big rise in the settlers' violence against the Palestinians, which is also, unfortunately, it's not taking as much focus as it's supposed to be. Settlers are acting as the authority now. Even with the support of the army, of the Israeli police, they are attacking villages, they are burning houses, they are shooting people. Nothing is also happening for these settlers. So all of this telling us that all the excuse of security, all the talking about Hamas in the West Bank is just an excuse to the Smotrich and to his party to expand their control on the West Bank and to push the Palestinians. It's the same. I believe it's the same plan in the West Bank and Gaza. Ethnic cleansing between the West Bank and Gaza. Sometimes the tools are a little bit different. A little bit, it's not that much. Maybe we don't see that much of bombings in the West Bank, but unfortunately, it's the same big plan.
John Ghazvinian, I want to get back to something you talked about a moment ago, and that is the United States reach out to Iran. The United States has been holding these very nascent talks on probably getting something back on the table as far as the Iranian nuclear program is concerned. But at the same time, the United States is also threatening secondary sanctions now in any country that does business with Iran. I mean, what is Washington's strategy here?
There is very clearly division within the Trump administration on how to handle Iran. The sense one has is that the president's own preference would be a deal with Iran as quickly as possible, a significant deal that he can trumpet as being somehow better than the deal that Obama reached with the P5+1 with Iran in 2015. And that can then open, Iran up to American business and so on. He seems to have Steve Witkoff on his side on this, but there are others in his administration that take a much harder line on all of this. There are elements within the administration that feel that Iran should not be allowed to enrich uranium, that they should be allowed to have a nuclear program. And Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, seems to feel this. But that their fuel for their reactors should come from overseas rather than from domestically enriched uranium sources. And then there are others who take an even more hardline view, which is that the Iranian nuclear program should be completely dismantled, similar to the demands that are being made by the Israelis, that they should follow the Libya model. That's a complete non-starter, of course. But it's not very easy to discern a clear strategy, for a unified strategy, let's say, from the Trump administration.
Yossi Mekelberg, what about the view from Israel on these talks taking place between the United States and Iran? I mean, as John pointed out a minute ago, the Israeli view is that the nuclear program should be completely dismantled. And in fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu used the example of Libya when he called for that. But how would Israel respond to the talks taking place now?
The view from Israel has been for more than 20 years that Iran shouldn't reach the point that it has nuclear weapons, shouldn't militarize its nuclear or weaponize its nuclear program. And on more than one occasion, there was the kind of the suggestion of using military force against Iranian nuclear facilities. Behind the scenes, what's called war between wars taking place in many ways, whether in cyberspace or the alleged assassination of scientists and others. The view from Israel that probably the preferred way is to use military force to do that, but I don't think they can do it without the green light from Washington. So they will watch the negotiation and see if the Trump administration can force an agreement. Let's remind ourselves that actually when the first Trump administration withdrew from the nuclear agreement, JCPOA, it was very much under the advice of Netanyahu then, and it proved to be quite disastrous.
Moien, I want to get to something else, and this is a very fast-moving dynamic or change that's taking place in the United States. I mean, it would appear that the current administration, the Trump administration, is not going to tolerate any kind of dissent when it comes to this country's views on Israel. We've seen the government revoke the visas of more than 1,000 college students whom it claims took part in anti-Israel protests. You know, and we saw some students have actually been arrested. One of those students was released on the orders of a judge. I mean, how does this change? I mean, how does this domestic view in the United States change what is going on as far as the Palestinians are concerned? You know, is it a setback?
Well, I think the main reason that most, if not all, of the international students are coming to the U.S., beside a very good education, is the freedoms that they are having here, despite what they're having in their home countries, if they are coming especially from dictatorial ones. So when this administration is not allowing any kind of a different views, this will for sure affect the decision of many of these students to decide not to continue studying here or not to come here at all. This is one. Secondly, I think it's becoming kind of a divided issue again, unfortunately, with this administration. It's either you are with us or against us. Yeah. And suddenly, all those who are against Trump support the Palestinians or support the Palestinian cause, and all those who are supporting now are against the Palestinian cause, without sometimes going in the details of what is really happening there. So this is one of the big issues that people are not really checking what is the reality on the ground. They are just reacting to this administration and reacting to their emotion to this, or how they feel about this administration. So if they support it, they will support all of its acts against the international students, and they will believe it without thinking about it. And if they're not, they will support the Palestinian or the other international students who has been affected by this. But again, I think it's a big mistake for the administration to try to reduce the freedoms of the people, especially most of, if not all of these people were peacefully protesting, not talking about any kind harming the U.S. in any case, or the U.S. citizens. So again, it's a very unclear until now why many of these people lost or revoked visas were revoked, and how can even fight against this. And this is putting a lot of fear even among the international students community. Yeah. Like I'm talking with many students, even in George Mason University, and they're really worried about a lot of things.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.